Thank you, Blake. Class. Way to take control. I'm Larry Ashton, the chairman of the museum board, and I am so thrilled to see all of you here tonight for this exquisite, wonderful unveiling of a legacy piece put together by none other than our Doc Lofgren, the director of the Ray Alf Museum. Hear, hear. You all have not come here to hear me tonight. They only gave me 30 minutes. I'm going to try to make it fast, and so that we have time, at least for Don, to do a little talking about his book. But without any further ado, I'd like to bring him on. This has been a project that is of love and sweat and toil and hard work, wherever he was for the last few years, in the classroom, out of the classroom, in the field, in Peru, other parts of the country. Don was thinking about this book, writing about this book.
So he's neglecting the other stuff then?
He was what?
Neglecting the other stuff then?
Exactly. He even took a sabbatical to concentrate on this book, and it wasn't a pure sabbatical because he was still teaching also. This guy is multi-talented, as you'll be able to see when you read this book. So, without any further, I present to you Dr. Don Lofgren.
Here, here.
Well, I think I'd like to tell you about my first meeting with Ray Alf, because we had a long relationship. I came in 1991 to Webb, not knowing anything about the school. Kind of came at the last minute as the third person that was interviewing. And when I got the job, I was in a real rush to come down here and find a place to live, and it was, you know, a really last minute thing. And I was in the dining hall, like on my second day. And somebody said, "Are you the new director of the museum?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Have you met Ray Alf?" And I said, "No, I haven't. Is he still alive?" I don't, you know. I think. Anyway, they said, "Yeah, he's still alive. He lives on campus." I said, "Oh, really? Oh." And then he said, "Well, hasn't been in the museum for years." And I thought, "Oh, is he sick? Is he handicapped?" And they said, no, he's fine. So, and I was like, what? So I called him up, and he invited me up to his house for tea. And that's how I got to know Ray. He wasn't very happy at that time, but we made a great friendship. And I knew him for 8 years, and he was a wonderful person, and he was always so happy and positive. It was just really, really an inspiration to know him. And when he passed away, you know, I had thought a lot about the history of the museum and his life, and he told me so many stories. And I had this idea in my head, I'd like to write a book about him someday. But I didn't have time. But I did put together a little volume in 2005 when he would have been 100 years old. And it's a little book of 44 pages. And it was kind of a first attempt to kind of document the museum's history and his life. And I sent it out. Some of you may have seen it. And there's a lot of mistakes in it, actually. It's kind of thrown together. But that kind of gave me the impetus to think about carrying that forward to a real book. And then we got more staff people. We got Andy Farkey, Gabe Santos. And, you know, I had a lot more time. So I decided to take on the job, and Taylor Stockdale gave me a year's partial sabbatical. I worked on the project for about 3 years. I accumulated information for many more years before that, but really solid work on it for 3 years. Interviewed over 80 people. The family archivist, Eric B. Williams, allowed us to use his archives. And when I say us, I'm talking about Jen Liu over there. She was a big part of the book. Without her, I'd have never finished the book. Probably had a nervous breakdown. But anyway, so there's a tremendous amount of work. But it was really interesting to read all about Ray's life and his family's life. It's quite an incredible story. He was an incredible person, and Webb was so lucky to have him here. And I'm very fortunate to have been his friend. So, yeah, it was a labor of love. And the book is 340 pages. It's beautifully hardbound with all color pictures, so you can see pictures. You know, you get those books and you look at the pictures in the middle of the book and the little black things, and you can hardly see anything. Well, we wanted the pictures to be really sharp, so you could see a lot of people and see what was going on. And about 6 months before it was finished, we were on the Peru trip, a bunch of us and some of the trustees, and I was pretty stressed out about it. And they said, you know, look it, do it the best way you possibly can, and we'll make sure we have the money for it. And so that's why we have this beautiful book. Hardbound, color pictures on both covers, all color, really high quality paper. It's because of those people that donated to this project. It makes such a great looking book like this. So, and that's one of them right there, Larry, Jim, a lot of the trustees helped out. So, just many thanks to them and all the people that contributed to the Ray Alf story. So, Ray, well, here's my first net. Ray, can you dim the top lights?
Who's lights guy?
I can do it down here too. Yeah. I'll leave the side ones on. Yeah, there we go. One's Ray Alf and one's me. I think you can figure it out. But that's the first Peccary dinner, 1993. Ray was so happy to have the museum have a big Peccary dinner, and we had 100 people come. Glasses on here. Ray was born in China, 1905. This is him with his dog in Canton, China. We lived there for 11 years. He could speak Cantonese. Isn't that a great picture? That's the kind of pictures the family archives have. Just really exceptional pictures. They lived along the Pearl River. Their parents were missionaries. The parents had lived there for many years. And so that's where they lived with all the Germans and English missionaries. And Ray was athletic even as a kid. That's him on the left doing a handstand in China, or headstand. And that's him on the right as an adult. So Ray was very, very strong and athletic all through his life. And then they moved back to the United States. They had a farm in North Dakota on the left, and Ray started running races just for fun and winning races barefoot. In like the county fair, and then at this military camp that he ran at. And so he knew he was a fast runner. And so when he went to college, he went to Doane College in Nebraska. He was quite a musician too. He could play trombone and French horn. And he went out for football. Can you see him there on the left, down low? He was a pretty small guy for a football player, but he was fast. So he could outrun a lot of people. And that's his brother right behind him, Bill, much bigger. But his real big sport was track. He discovered that he was incredibly fast. And that's him on the right. He was one of the greatest sprinters in Nebraska at that time. Set a national record in the 300-yard dash. Set a lot of conference records, Doane records. He was considered the fastest man in Nebraska. So he was nationally acclaimed as a sprinter. And after he finished Doane, he tried out for the Olympics, and he had qualified for 3 events in the trials, 100 meters, 200 meters, and 400 meters, but he didn't make the Olympics in any one of those distances. But he stuck around, and he ran for the Denver Track Club for a year, and he entered a big race in July of 1929, and he won. This is some of the headlines from the Denver paper and the Omaha paper. Ray Alf wins junior AAU title. And that got him the notoriety that the LA Track Club was there, and they asked him to come to Claremont, or to LA, to run for them. So he left Nebraska and that area and went to LA, not knowing anybody at all. And that's how he ended up at Webb. And this is him when he first came to Webb, and that's the old admissions catalog in 1930. You can see the map is a little bit different than it was today. So there he is. He's got his book in here. It looks like his first day at work, doesn't it? So I'm going to read a little bit about how he came to Webb. So this is a chapter called Webb School of California. It has the same picture on it. The train that carried Ray Alf to California arrived at Union Station in downtown Los Angeles in the latter half of July. Being a single male at the age of 23, 1 year out of college, who had moved around a lot in the past year, Ray probably arrived with 2 suitcases or a suitcase and a trunk, all he owned in the world at the time. Also, Ray came to Los Angeles with no immediate plans other than to develop his running skills with the Los Angeles Athletic Club. Running was his whole focus at this moment in his life. And to help Ray get settled, the LA Track Club had reserved a room for him at the Brown Hotel. About a week later, Ray was paying $5 a month for a room on the 3rd floor of a house on 29th Street, about 2 blocks north of the University of California. By now, Ray was working out daily with the LA Track Club. And when he wasn't running, Ray walked the streets. He knew few people, had little money, and had no idea what he should do for work. But he needed to figure it out quickly. As he himself stated in an oral interview, "I was starving and looking for something to do." Ray's most recent job was the 1-year teaching position he had at Fairmont High School in Nebraska, but he didn't want to teach again. It was too demanding. Teaching required hours of coaching after school, as well as preparation of lesson plans outside of work hours. Ray wanted a 40-hour-a-week job, would give him time to run. He applied for all types of jobs, from washing dishes to working for local power and telephone utilities, but no one wanted him. Ray even thought of contacting the Dollar Steamship Company to see if they needed someone to play French horn in a band on their weekly cruises between Los Angeles and Hawaii. He worked at a stock exchange for a couple of days. Somebody got him a job there, but he didn't like it. So he decided that he was going to register at the Boynton Teachers Agency. Ray's situation had become so bleak that he was willing to teach again if given the opportunity. Soon thereafter, the agency sent Ray to a couple of military schools for interviews, but neither offered him a position. A few days later, Thompson Webb, the headmaster of Webb School in Claremont, was looking for a tutor and read the application Ray filed at the agency. Thompson Webb must have liked what he read, because he asked the agency to send Ray out to Claremont. Ray was 23 and a half years old when he first visited Webb School. As he described it, he took the eastbound electric train from Union Station and got off at Claremont Village. The arrangement was for him to meet Thompson Webb at the school, which was a few miles from the station, so he had to walk along dirt roads between rows and rows of orange and lemon trees. It was a hot day and a long walk. Ray got very thirsty and knocked on the door of a house on the way and asked for a glass of water. When he finally arrived at Webb, Ray learned there was another man there interviewing for the same job. It was quite awkward because Thompson Webb toured the campus with both prospective employees. So each knew the other was a rival for the position. Ray was rather quiet and reserved during the interview process and described his competitor as a blabbermouth who had captured Mr. Webb's full attention. Ray thought for sure the other applicant was going to get the job, so he's feeling dejected as Thompson Webb gave him a ride back to the train station. But as soon as Ray got out of the car, he was greatly surprised when Mr. Webb said, "I'm going to give you the job." So Ray went back to his little boarding house, packed up his stuff, and he came out to Webb a few weeks later, and he was tutoring a student in geometry. And he ended up staying for 70 years at Webb. But he had no idea at the time. So one of the reasons he stayed so long, he met his wife, Pearl Wright. She was a teacher. Vivian Webb had a school in her house. And she had a little school for younger kids, and Pearl Wright was teaching there. And so they met. And actually, she was assigned by Thomson Webb to help Ray learn how to teach, because he was pretty awkward at it. So they fell in love and got married, and then there's Janet Driggers, or now Janet Alf, but now Janet Driggers on the right-hand picture. I saw her 2 days ago. She's 88 years old now. And Ray had all kinds of interests. He ran track for a while, and then he kind of got into astronomy, built an observatory at Webb in 1935. He had tons of talent. And the observatory is at the top of the Alamo. There's the Alamo, lower west Alamo, upper west is not built yet, and you can see where the observatory is. Look at all the orange groves in the background. So it's really a country school back there. So Ray was looking for things to do, and astronomy was one of them. But then he discovered paleontology, and they took a trip out to Barstow and found the peccary skull in 1936. And this inspired him to become a paleontologist. And made the newspaper, 1936. They found the peccary skull, a new genus and species, found by Bill Webb. Ray was a part of it. And then Ray started doing summer trips, and then he met John Clark, professor at the University of Colorado, who inspired him to go back to school for a year, got a geology degree and a master's in 1 year, came back to Webb and taught geology and paleo and biology. And then he did hundreds of trips with Webb students. One of the great traditions of the school, the peccary trips, weekend trips. Some people in that picture are here. And there's Ray on his cot at Barstow. And Ramsey Harris, another famous teacher, flipping a pancake they call the golden brown. You only flipped a pancake once. That was the rule. And then the amazing trackway collections they found there too, elephant tracks at Barstow. And then there's the Easter trips, where they go to the Grand Canyon and stop at Seligman and collect tracks of reptiles. Picture from 1950 there. And then on to the Grand Canyon to hike it and to also collect specimens from the Bass Limestone, 1.2 billion year old rock that had impressions in it that might be fossils and might not. Still unresolved. Ray thought they were jellyfish, and he didn't get much support for that idea. But we have students actually studying them right now, and I think they're some kind of fossil. So they're really spectacular. And some kids carried the rocks out of here. One was 53 pounds. Two young boys, freshmen, carried it out, 4,000 feet. One of them's right here, Jim Hall. What were you thinking?
I wasn't.
And then the summer trips all over Nebraska, Wyoming, great adventures. Ray getting his cigarette lit, having a shot of hot coffee. He used to play around. He was pretty fast, so he didn't have to worry. And the exceptional teacher, the awe-inspiring teacher that could hang from the pipes to demonstrate the opposable thumb. What Ray used to do in the classroom was magical. You have to read about it in the book. And he was a great coach, too. This is 1950 track team. They're all set conference records and web records that lasted for decades. The guy on the right of Ray is on my right is Ben Jones. His brother's here. So anyway, they're great athletes. Two of them went to the state meet. It's incredible. Coach was Ray Alf. And his museum was the Jackson Library. It's just crammed full of stuff. Didn't take long to fill it up.
In the basement, right?
Basement of Jackson Library. Famous paleontologists came to visit. Al Romer from Harvard on the left. Probably the most famous vertebrate paleontology at that time. George Simpson with the thick glasses from the American Museum in New York came to visit. So Ray's museum is getting a lot of notoriety. And finally, they needed a new museum. So there it is on the design. And they had to raise $400,000. Took over 10 years. Ray got pretty impatient with that, but he hung in there. He wanted it so bad. And finally, it was built. Look at, they're putting the rocks on the side of the building there. And then it was opened in 1967 and dedicated to Ray in 1968. This is the dedication ceremony. Fred Hooper's at the podium. And Thompson Webb's on the right, and then it looks like Ray on his right. Is anybody there at the dedication? Bill Ripley. So they dedicated the museum to Ray, and that's the peccary above the doorway. So I got a short reading about that. So this is the end of the chapter on the development of the museum. With the dedication of the museum, Ray's dream had been fulfilled, and now his name would be forever displayed above the main entrance as the words Raymond M. Alf Museum were prominently placed in the mosaic of the peccary. Ray's grand vision for the museum was that it teach people the history of life and have them feel a part of it. Soon that would happen, as the museum was to host many hundreds of people every year, because the Alf Museum was designed to accommodate tour groups, unlike the Jackson Library Museum. Both Ray and Thompson Webb were delighted it worked out so well for the Peccary Society, as Webb School was now the only secondary school in the world with its own very large paleontology museum, a feat yet to be replicated. Ray had endured years of waiting before his museum was finally built, a lesson of perseverance. Thompson Webb may have said it best when he told Ray, "You are famous for the museum, and I'm famous for the chapel." That's true, isn't it? So then Ray, Webb built a house for Ray in Pearl. So they lived at Webb for the rest all through the 70s, and the 80s, and the 90s. So they had a long time they lived at Webb in a house on the upper campus, actually where my family lives right now. So when I was writing the book about Ray Alf, I was living in his house. No ghost stories, I'm sorry. He never talked to me, but
It's too fast.
anyway, his health declined after a while, and then the years I knew him in the 90s, I first met him when he was 85. He was still pretty spry, and he slowly kind of went downhill, but he always kept a positive attitude. No matter what his health was, he was always positive. It was very inspirational to see. And he died in 1999 in September. Some of you may have been to his memorial service. And he hiked the Grand Canyon 50 times. And his 50th trip was with the class in 1970. And they invited him to give the commencement address. And I want to read a short passage about that, and then there'll be one small one after that. So this is about his 50th trip hiking the Grand Canyon with the class in 1970. Larry, are you a class in 1970?
Yes.
Joe Thomas, somewhere back there. So they hiked the canyon with Ray. In May of 1970, Ray made his 50th hike out of the Grand Canyon with the class in 1970. The class had asked Ray to accompany them on their hike and also deliver their commencement address at their graduation. Ray was honored to accept both invitations as he was very fond of the class of 1970. When they emerged from the Grand Canyon, the seniors gathered around Ray to express their thanks for all his efforts on their behalf, and then presented him with a gold-colored rock hammer in honor of his 50th hike out of the canyon he loved so much. They then sang the Peccary Song to Ray. As described by James Sylvester, Ray accepted the hammer with tears in his eyes and later completely dissolved and sobbed like a child as he leaned against one of the Peccary trucks in response to kind and thoughtful gesture by the seniors. The full text of Ray's commencement address for the class of 1970 is found in his book, Footprints on the Sands of Time, book of his writings. I'm going to read you an excerpt about that, about his hike. Ray had this incredible writing style. This is Ray's words. Then in the stillness of the night, each on his own, we started the 7.5-mile hike up. Through 2 billion years of Earth history, some for the first time, one for the 50th. Mile after mile, switchback after switchback, we struggled against gravity as we lifted our corporal beings a mile high into the heavens, and at last stood on the top, on the edge of the south rim. We paused to give thanks and then gazed back into time and distances the mind cannot quite comprehend. We felt as if we were beginning to stand on the edge of understanding. We felt as if we began to see the design of the universe and our place in it. It's pretty profound. After Ray's death in 1999, Philip Kirkwood hiked to the bottom of the Grand Canyon with a third of his grandfather's cremated remains, where he gently poured the ashes into the swirling waters of the mighty Colorado River. Of the other 2 parcels, one was spread by his daughters Janet and Mimi and other family members adjacent to the track on the Webb campus. The other parcel was spread at the Peccary site at Rainbow Basin on the 2006 alumni Peccary trip by some of Ray's most ardent students. Some of you were there. And my last image shows Ray in his Jackson Library, where he taught for so many years and had his original museum, and then a trip, I don't know which summer trip it was, but it was a rainbow and he posed beside it, his fist in the air. That is Ray, the essential Ray Alf shot. That captures who he was. And my last reading, this is my last image too, is by Robert Hefner, the class of 1953, talking about Ray's legacy. It's amazing what one person can do in a human's life. I remember Ray always saying that the greatest thing one can do is teach, because what you teach doesn't die with you. It's the greatest legacy you can leave. And with me, Ray's left an incredible legacy. Also, Ray was teaching a lot more than I thought while I was at Webb. It wasn't until much later that I realized this. He taught enthusiasm. He taught the zest for life. He taught philosophical thought. He taught relativity and choice. He was way ahead of his time. He was so far ahead of anything that I understood then that it took me the rest of my life to really figure out the depth of his teaching. So that's a pretty powerful statement. So any questions, I guess, or comments? I hope you all enjoy the book. It's there's a lot of words in it, but I think it captures them pretty well. Yeah.
So sorting through, you have so many people you interviewed, sorting through so much material, taking on the mantle of someone like this that came before you. What was the most difficult thing you had to go through in assembling all this and deciding what you left out and what you put in the book?
You know, the most difficult thing for me that I couldn't do, and then I'll answer your question, is that, I had all these questions after reading all these materials about Ray, and I couldn't ask him a question. So like 1 minute with Ray, I could clear this up, but there's no way I could ask him. So I'd have to depend on people that he knew to ask a lot of these questions. And so it was hard to go through all the interviews and figure out what parts to take out and use and how to organize them. And I would take these interviews on planes. My daughters, paid by the museum to to transcribe all these oral interviews that we had made. So I had these documents, and I would go through and put Post-its on, and try to figure out what would be interesting. You want it to be interesting. So I just would. It was hard, and one chapter never really came together for me. But I get quotes like Bill Ripley, that Ray would have this fake basement in the Jackson Library, had a big table, and he would say, "I'm going to go down in the basement," and he would disappear, behind this table, and there's no basement, and everybody knew it. Then a month later, he'd say, "Ripley, go down and get that book in the basement." That's a direct quote from his interview. So yeah, these great stories of Ray Alf, it's just kind of hard to organize them all. Yeah, Rich?
Where did he get his zest for life? I mean, what was his early childhood? I mean, was it privileged? Was it hard?
He just was, had a ton of energy. And, he was a track star, and he, you got to have a lot of confidence to be a track star. And he just, he just did everything he did was 100%, 110%. That's just his personality. I didn't know him as a teacher, but I mean, some people in this room did. And that's what I heard, that he just had a tremendous love of life and zest for life that was always there, pretty much.
Was that instilled by his parents, or was he
I don't think
different?
so.
Okay.
I think he was different than his siblings. I didn't get that sense from his siblings. He just, when he became this great teacher, he just delved into it like he did with his running. He's going to be the best there ever was. And Cara Jameson said his quote in here is that there's a lot of great people, men and women on this earth, but there are few giants. And Ray Alf was a giant. I thought that was a pretty interesting thing to say about him. Tammy?
It seems like you brought him out of his recluse life that he had here. If it wasn't for you, he probably wouldn't have done everything. So congratulations to you for doing what you did. Yeah.
Well, I think Ray saw an opportunity to get back in the museum. I mean, he found the museum. Must have been killing him not to go down there, and be.
Why wasn't he doing it? Why wasn't he doing it?
What's in the book, but he was.
I'll read that later.
There's the main thing was that they were modernizing the museum, and they were changing a lot of things that he had created, and he was upset by that, and he didn't think that his opinion was valued very much in that process, and he decided not to come down there anymore, and he was very unhappy about it. And then his wife had passed away, and so when I met him, he was kind of at this low point, and he really, I think, wanted to come back, and I didn't know him. He didn't know me. I have no history with him, so I invited him to come down on Thursdays to talk, and we became friends, and pretty soon he was coming down every day on his walk with Rick White, and he'd give everybody a hug, and La Date Deum, and he was a sweet guy, really. But he went through a bad stage. Bert?
Did you have a chance to mention in the book how every time a baby was born on campus, you were going for?
It's in there, yeah. Ray was a prolific drawer, and some of you have his drawings, I'm sure. I've got a few. And when a baby was born at Webb, like Sean James or Kate Lofgren, he would draw Rose, present it to the family. So there's a lot of roses around with the faculty kids. But that's kind of how nice he was, He was a pretty credible person. And even when he was in his last years, he was really upbeat. Hearing the stories of people visiting him at his senior center. Yeah, Jim?
Well, if Ray was here, and of course he is here, he would say, "Good boy, Lofgren."
On the last page of the book, there's Ray's sayings. Or not the last page, second to last page. And he's got all his sayings, and one of them is, "Good boy." You know? I'm sure he said that to you, right? Maybe. Anyway, it's you know, I really thank you all for coming. It's really nice to see you all here and celebrate the museum and Ray and the book.
At some point,
Jen Liu, our great chairman, Larry Ashton. And we have 2,000 copies, so tell your friends. They're
well,
not,
I think I can speak for all the museum trustees in saying that at some point, someone will be in this museum talking about the book about you.
well, thank you. But anyway, thank you.
Here, here.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.